conference, we have a speaker dedicated to giving the AJ Swaby Address. So for those people who don't know, Swaby was the founder of the Australian Plant Societies around Australia. And he started essentially the program to promote and conserve and grow native plants back in 1958. And he particularly had an aim to support local engagement around native plants, which is so relevant because so many species grow in one part of Australia and not in other parts of Australia. So having that local group and also individuals who support the research around native plants, it's absolutely critical and continues to be critical today. We've heard a number of speakers over the last few days talk about the lack of knowledge about Australian native plants and the power of what's now called citizen science. So really back in 1958, Swaby was the one who kind of created that initiative and began the associations of the Australian Plant Societies. We're very pleased that Costa Georgiadis agreed to give the AJ Swaby Address. Most of us know Costa as a TV personality, but he's also has extraordinary number of talents in many other areas. A landscape architect, a lover of food, commitment to sustainability. And I had a personal experience with Costa, which he won't remember, of course, but I was down in Melbourne at the airport and I was going down the lift to get on the plane, and he was coming up the lift to wait in the lounge, and I said, "Oh my God, it's Costa." And I go, "Hi Costa, great job, more native plants please." And he goes, and I don't know, that was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and you can see that what happened is there has been. I don't know, you just don't know the impact you have sometimes. So Costa is going to share first of all what he sees as the future of native plants, and then he'll be facilitating the session with the students. So without more ado, let me, and please welcome Costa.
Conference gets off to a good start when I see tea served in a pot. A big pot with strong. So yeah, all's well. It's been a pleasure, thank you. That's fired me right up. Wow. What a pleasure. I've just driven down from Sydney. I've had my mind focused on this. What a location, what a crowd of people, what an opportunity to deliver this particularly special address. I thought, given that there's been 4 days of conference, the last thing you needed was another PowerPoint. So I'm actually going to go rogue. Yeah, look, it was real. When Ralph rang me up and asked me to do the AJ Swaby Address, and then I kind of learned a little bit about it, it really made me think about what that represents to not just all of you, but everyone that has supported the Society for Growing Australian Native Plants over a long time. As was mentioned, this all had its roots back in about 1966, when the first group was formed, but it goes back even further to 1957. And Arthur was writing native plant articles in the Your Garden magazine. So we're talking about passion, we're talking about, anywhere between 57 and 65 years. So I'm very sort of chuffed to be able to acknowledge that Arthur and his passion has led to us being here today, and an incredible amount of communication about native plants over 6 decades. And yeah, I just wanted to set that up. And one of the interesting points about the debate about the SGAP. I mean, it's always good to have an acronym. If you don't have an acronym, you're kidding yourself. The nature of an acronym can determine how good the standing is for people's appreciation of you from afar. But the big question was, that difference was providers of reliable information and plants suitable for gardens throughout the continent, or to continue to practice cultivation for preservation to maintain genetically diverse populations of our native plants in cultivation. These were the things that were going on in the minds of all of your predecessors and yourselves up until now. And that was a nice context for me to think about this address and to think about what it means to come on and to stand on the shoulders of people that have carried the value and the values of native plants for a long time. And there was, of course, people before that. But for us here now, you're representing a wonderful period of time. And I want to start by, reflecting on the fact that this talk was past, present, and future. To start, I think I need to start by acknowledging that we're on Dharawal land, and everything about Dharawal land was native plants. Everything about the continent was native plants. There wasn't anything else here. And that's a really important place to start. And I want to acknowledge that, the elders past and present and what they've held strong for us to this point in time, and how each and every one of you as native plant lovers are carrying that connection to country. And it's a very important connection moving forward, and particularly for our students as they move into a period where that acknowledgement is going through a wonderful shift and a wonderful elevation of importance. And that's come because people have and are stepping up and not just including but allowing this knowledge to lead. And that's a big difference to just saying, come and sit at the side of the table. And this is really positive. And when you think back to what AJ Swaby was leading at that time, we're talking about an opportunity to bring knowledge and information that's been part of this country for hundreds and thousands of years. And I want to touch on that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as the beginning of my opportunity to talk to you today. I'm fortunate enough to travel on a lot of country, and yesterday I was down in Hanging Rock with students, Kids Teaching Kids conference on Wiradjuri country, and prior to that I was in Adelaide, and now we're talking these names. And I know that there was a talk about plant names, and there's such an opportunity to continue that thread and continue that sharing of knowledge. I know that we got started, I've been following the conference even though I wasn't able to be here because I was down at of all things, a daffodil festival in Kyneton. It's not quite the segue into this conference, but in saying that, there's a certain happiness about daffodils at this time of year in the right climate, and anything that captures attention to drive focus towards caring for the land, be it through gardening, be it through the happiness of storytelling or looking at a flower. We need to draw people in, and I'm not discriminatory about how we do that. So whether it was that festival, whether it was a few days before that, and I see Peter here from the wonderful Botanic Gardens community greening team, and we were up in Mudgee this time last week. We had 600 plus students, 18 presenters, 16 or 18 different schools on a Mudgee. It's called a Watershed Land Care Green Day. Again, ways of bringing people in to the fold. And I feel like I'm sitting in a room of people that have such knowledge on our native plants. And I really believe that our native plants are the baton for change. Not change in your world because you've loved and fallen for them for a long time, but I'm talking change to the big narrative, to that opportunity of sharing through plants, action. We talk, you hear it all the time, we talk about reconciliation. But my friend John, an elder over in Perth, enlightened me one time with a really simple tweak of that word. And he put a C in there, not for my name. He said reconciliation. And it's a doing word then. It becomes a verb. It becomes this opportunity. And I look at what your passions are. I look at your understanding and genuine mongrel interest in native plants, like to the point that I am just a mere beginner in this room. I think that the plants are the baton. The plants are the Trojan horse. The plants are this non-intimidating, non-confrontational, apolitical. You can make it political, of course, because they are going to provide solutions, and people have to debate about where they want the solutions to begin. But when you bring a native plant, that's like food, because everyone's interested. Everyone wants to know. And I feel like when you think about something like the 70s, where there was that bush garden renewal, it didn't, that interest was very specific, and it lived as a certain period of time. And then it was like, oh, well, now we're into the 80s and it's all pastels and it's all this and it's all that, and it changed. Right? And I still remember dealing with the consequences of a blue gum 400 from the front wall of the terrace in Paddington. Multiples of those. But what I have seen from this conference, what I'm seeing out there in community, on country, in our landscapes, in our schools, in our community gardens, everywhere I go, the connection to native plants is not some decade or kind of fad that's ebbed up again, and we're all back into it because we're over the cottage garden look. It's gone to the next level, and when I think about the fact that the conference started with Auntie Joyce, not only to set the scene, but to talk about food and medicine and healing and culture, that's where native plants are cutting across such a narrative, such a storytelling well of riches, that this is not something that we're just writing a little bit of a set, you know, given we're on the coast, four sets of waves coming in. No, this is here for the long trajectory. There's urgency around the challenges and the disturbances of climate, but we cannot dump that urgency on our students that are here. We can't. It's not to say that things aren't urgent. It's not to say that if you read that State of the Environment report, you wouldn't be in tears. at some of that information, and I am. But we need to focus that energy and ensure that we don't place angst and undue weight of expectation on our next generation. What we need to do is dump in spades your enthusiasm, your excitement, and your knowledge of Australian native plants, and combine that with the knowledge that they're receiving, which is way beyond anything that most of your generation, didn't even get taught about these things. Not an iota, even barely for me. Going through high school, we received very little knowledge, experience about this, let alone history. And I'll touch on some of that through some of the books. I bought some books that show and tell, not so much to show you, but maybe show me while I'm talking, to talk about this. But yeah, we don't want that urgency. The only urgency I want to see coming out of this room is your urgency to take your knowledge and make sure it's amplifying way beyond your usual scope of people. How can you share that knowledge? How can this room be amplified into lots of different spaces, be it schools, be it community gardens, be it local crop swaps, be it every nook, cranny and corner of society. Because the specialist knowledge from Auntie Joyce to then, Professor David Keith talking about the future of plants, and Associate Professor Scott Mooney talking about fire, humans and climate as drivers of change. There we go, climate. We have this chance with this knowledge to be at the forefront of the engagement, the information, the data, and how we drive that data, how we talk about that data, not as a sheer dump, but making it engaging, making it entertaining, making it informative, finding threads and arteries and veins to take it out yourself, and take it out not just as a society of Australian native plant lovers, but as individuals in your reach, and who you influence, and how you can step up and say, well, how can I connect with these students? And not just the students in the room, but the students that are out in every village, in every town and in every suburb. How can I connect with schools? If we want this information that comes from our approved bastions of knowledge, universities. But what we're seeing change now is that we're recognising that the bastions of cultural knowledge, that Indigenous stories, Indigenous knowledge is science. And just because that science wasn't in our approved bastion, it does not mean that it is not the most valuable information we can tap into at this point in time. And the exciting part is that it is happening. But it needs all of us to put down any guards, to put down any predisposed ideas, to put down any colonial blinkers and say, hang on a second, we've been conditioned, we've been forced into canisters, we've missed an opportunity to have nurtured so much knowledge. And the big difference being that we nurture that knowledge with that leadership, not just a greenwash, not just an indigenous of like, yes, they're included at the table. No, we need that leadership. It hasn't had the chance to be. And when we think like that, then all of that knowledge should walk side by side. And it reminds me of a wonderful, and you'll hear this on country wherever you go, but in the words of in Arnhem Land, Yirrkala, the term is Balagalili, is we walk together. And when we combine Indigenous science with contemporary science, and we have so many incredible speakers here. When that knowledge is combined with Indigenous knowledge, then I think the future will be so incredibly rich. We have these veins of gold that we've buried, we've chosen not to draw on. And I feel like the future really is this opportunity to bring it together. Clarence, of course, started with a day in the life of 1,000 years ago. A wonderful way to set a context. 1,000 years may seem like a lot, but when you boil it down in the terms that we think as plants, as plant communities, as landscapes, 1,000 years is not a long time. There's incredible riches that are still undiscovered. The knowledge that our youth here today, your opportunities to take science with culture, combine art and story and paint a direction for all of us is second to none. You have access to knowledge and data that all of us in this room never had access to. But when we combine that knowledge and then understand that it's not just about more data, it's about how we interpret, connect, and then share that data. We're all amplifiers, but it's the story that matters the most. Because I can have all the information in the world. I can have the biggest heart and the biggest intent to save the world. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't be doing that in these times. Trying to save the world is not what this is about. And we can't do it alone. The idea of trying to save the world on our own, that's what creates urgency. That's what creates paralysis. That's what creates angst. And that's what will create a generation of people overwhelmed. When I believe the overwhelm should be the opportunity that this room and Australian native plants provide as this incredible fluid link to bring culture, story, history, past, future, and any version in between together and say, we've got this. We can do this. We don't need talk notes. We don't need a political narrative that's governed by how well you can just not answer a question. This whole fake news, I don't want our students here to ever tolerate that. And to make accountability something that it always used to be as our nation, but there's always been a little bit of accountability that we haven't wanted to look at. There's been a map that we've been happy to push things under, and in the last 5 years or so, that has become an art. And it's an art that I want an iota of, because A, we don't need to waste our time, and B, pity the fool. Because, yeah, I think we're all over it, but we have to actually state it. Otherwise, things just go back into the groove and we move on. You go, oh yeah, well, that was just 2 years. We'll just get back into whatever we considered was normal. No, we're not going backwards. Now's the chance. Now's the chance. Disturbance in a landscape is the most positive thing you can have. Because when a landscape gets disturbed, and you only need to ask Dave Lindemeyer, when a forest has disturbance, that's when the most massive amount of change happens. The levels of light come in and the resonant feedback can come to life because of that disturbance. But at the same time, when we think about disturbances, we're creating incredible disturbances. Canberra suddenly becomes an international airport. That's like a tree falling in the forest and opening it up to incredible biosecurity threats, because there'd never been an incursion so deep. New ports along the coast. bringing boats in, oops, and suddenly we're seeing these things and the impact that that has on native plants and the impact that native plants can have on resilience is incredibly important, but we need to be around that. From a future leaning perspective, we need to be around the impact that potential invasives have on the microclimate and the opportunity for our native plants to express everything they can, to express what they need in a changing climate, how they're going to adapt, what that future will look like, how our science today, you know, we're in very disturbing times, but let's not be disturbed. Let's use that to arouse. Let's use that to activate. Let's use that to motivate. Let's use that to take the information and knowledge we have and drive it forward. And it comes down to this incredible opportunity because we can play with aperture. I'm talking big picture challenges, but then we can go right down. And this is a joy for the students. You can get geeky. There's a lot of nerds in this room. And I say that with the utmost respect because I like hanging with nerds. Because nerd equals passion in my book. It equals, I'm going to dive so deep into, as Martin Becker, lichen. It's a very dad joke, but he's liking the lichen. And I'm liking that he's liking the lichen because that's a world within worlds. And you can get passionate about that. Emotive and evocative about that. And show through one photo of lichen, one little story. You know, lichens, they climbed out and they slowly win. There's so much narrative we can take out of something as simple as lichen. And, you know, flipping the aperture back out, you know, what are the models of conservation that we're looking at? Bush care and public land compared to the incredible work that's going on in private land at the moment. And I know that Patsy Nagel spoke about that. The work that I'm seeing in private land and the wonderful dissemination of information about the release of an Australian marsupial into a fenced off area so that they can start to repopulate. But we have an incredible responsibility to deal with the invasives that we have been given the baton for. And any talk about saying, well, they're naturalised, they're colonised, that's how it is, let's just accept it. Well, I can't accept that. Because how can we ever celebrate the incredible width, breadth and depth of our native species when they're getting wiped out by invasives? Not just invasive animals, which are doing an incredible job, but invasive plants that remove the habitat and the food sources for the native animals. So if they're not copping it by being attacked, they're copping it by not having enough to. And I mean, this is very basic, but we need to tell this story. And most of you are working in this. But we need to ensure that people see these connections, and when a fenced off reserve sees success, that's our opportunity to say, well, let's move the fence. Let's shift it again. And then we'll do it again. And I've been to some incredible places recently where there is success, let alone unfenced areas. We were filming a story up in Lovett Bay, up on Pittwater, where a group, unlike many of you here that are all involved with, whether it's on private land or public land, bush regeneration. They've worked for 20 years to get rid of the asparagus fern, the fishbone fern, the lantana, the olives, everything, the top of the pops, everything you can imagine. There's a group of about 12 to 14 people that get together once a month for a couple of hours. That's it. When I went up to look at the block, you might have seen the story we did on Gardening Australia. the kangaroo grass is back, the wallaby grass is back, the bladed grass is back, the wallabies are back, the antechinus are back, the pygmy possums are back. Like, this is in Pittwater, barely X number of kilometres as the crow flies from the heart of Sydney. And this is a group of people who chipped away just one Sunday a month for a couple of hours. And in 20 years they fixed it. 20 years is not a long time. And I want our students to understand that. Because in 20 years, it's like, and when you invest in that like a superannuation and you just put $1 in and then you watch it grow, you put 2 hours in a week, a month, and watch that grow into the regeneration of a landscape. But the most important part that I need to cut to the chase on that is that it does not happen without baking quality morning teas. Because the morning tea is as valuable as the return of the antechinus. Because it wouldn't happen without morning tea. Because that's what brings the hearts together. That's what motivates. That's what says, oh, no, I'll come after 1 o'clock on that Sunday because I'm getting together with my besties. And we're chipping away. And I had this book and I thought it was quite appropriate. It says, How Tea Cozies Change the World. Because when we think like that, then we're not overwhelmed. We're not saying, oh, this is a 20-year plan, or this is a 50-year plan. There's plans being done and reflected on by some of our presenters that are 50, 100, 200. We want to talk legacy, we want to talk investment, we want to talk proper handing of legacy for our lives. Then thinking in those times and knitting a good tea cozy, you need to get on the case. That's the start of it. And of course, Bruce Usher, this is, I'm just tapping in on who's spoken, because this is the message of the future. Bruce Usher talked about looking and seeing. We live in a visual world. I can see it. I know you're there. Okay. We live in a visual world. The photo of that lichen, the photo of that pygmy possum, the photo of that antechinus, the photo of that grass that you've left to dry, that became the overnight B&B for the blue-banded bees to line up on overnight. That's the power of images. That's the power of story, visual story, that you students have this chance to learn about. That you've got this opportunity to go, wow, I can bang a photo of at the drop of a hat and share it with my friends and just go, this is beyond nerd. Like, this has gone around, and actually the whole little meter's now just spinning like a top because it's so good. Because I've now made someone think about what's all that orange on that highway cutting. I just thought it was the afternoon sunset. Little things. Little things is how you can take your passion and hang it in front of people. And you never know what that could mean. And of course, the plant names. The plant names are great. Look at my t-shirt. I got this t-shirt because I have a chat on Triple J, the youth network, and once every couple of months I get on and we just talk gardening and plants. And I mentioned Cucaniopsis anacardioides. And someone said, we make t-shirts, and they sent me this t-shirt. Whoa. Right? And that means a lot, because when I go on there, if you could see the iPad, while I'm waiting, I come on at the top of the hour, and then we do a song, 3 questions, a song, 4 questions, a song, 4 questions, a song, 5 questions, a song, a chat, out. And that hour is the fastest hour in the world. But I get people coming up and asking me about that and saying, oh, I really enjoyed what you did. And then I wear this t-shirt and then I can tell that story because people go, Cupernicus. And this is just the Latin name. What about the indigenous name for that? What about when we start to put those names there? What about the sound of those names when that indigenous name that we are all starting to use for place names starts to resonate across the landscape and connect with this country, that the country can hear the sounds of its landscape that it hasn't heard for just a very short period of time, but an incredibly long period of longing, 200 years. When those sounds come back out through the reactivation of those plant names, the reactivation of place names, this is the opportunity that you can ride without the baggage. The baggage is still there, but you don't have to pick it up. You can just go, no, I'm not carrying that back. Let's take this forward with a new found enthusiasm. And then, of course, there's design. I mean, I came around the corner and there was a garden with just native grasses. And there's an opportunity for designers. Laurie Smith and Chris Larkin talked about design. That opportunity to illustrate that, a meadow can be a meadow of Australian plants. We can bring this biodiversity back into every neighbourhood, to every street verge, to every park. We can connect and build these corridors of biodiversity that run from the water to the mountains and everywhere in between. We can tie all this together. Luke and Catherine talked about starting a native plant nursery. Lynn talked about the Berry Public School nursery. This is about cultivation. It's about curriculum, it's about education. How can you help get this information that you have as a group out into these levels of the community to fuel our students? And then, of course, I talked about Dr. Pearson's wildlife safe havens, how we can make safe havens for our pollinators. We can make safe havens for our wildlife through using these plants that you love. I don't have to tell you to. You already do it. And of course there was eucalypts, eremophilus, isopogons, grevilleas, banksias, all of those things that I talk about, fire forests and biodiversity of David Lindemeyer. Like an incredible individual taking the power of forests. And I've got, how can we do this? There's so many ways. I mean, all of these books, Merlin Sheldrake, this entangled life around the power of fungi, the forest in the tree, how fungi shape the earth. I mean, we're worried about sending all these phalluses to Mars because of some dated belief that we're going to get all the answers up there. The answers are under our feet. Oh, five minutes to end my intro. David's work on the beauty of the Victorian Highland, give books, give subscriptions, give more plants, get children connected with junior Landcare. Some of the work being done by Landcare. Landcare is leading the way in dealing with succession. The conference recently started with a day for the Youth Landcare Forum. And then we have the Ferny Creek Landcare Group trying to join a corridor where there was a mine through the middle, and they've been joining this up over 30 years. But in a very short period of time, 85-year-old Peter connected with intrepid Landcare Gabriel. In the space of 2 months, she increased the group from 32 to 180. And they now have a pool of 500 people in the one Landcare group, and they're reconnecting this corridor for the gliders to come back across. But what's the key there? The key there is active succession planning, active passing on of the information, mentoring, finding a mentor. Who can you mentor? Who can you share your knowledge with? It's really exciting. It's really, really exciting. And I know Michelle's going to be talking about resilience from species to landscapes. And that's what this is about. Which part of the lens are you looking through? Is it the species? But the species exist because of the landscape, and how do you fit into the regeneration and the nurture of the landscape in the big picture, but then the work that you chip away at this level to collect the seeds and maybe take it to the local school, to maybe lead, instead of Father's Day and Mother's Day, giving away some cheap 2-bit, oh, that was interesting, for the $10 gift. I've seen a school that went to their local land care group, or could come to some of you and say, where's an endangered species? They then grew that local endangered species. There was 1,200 students at that school. Across Father's Day and Mother's Day, 2,400 plants went out into the community. Like that, oh, makes me want to cry. That's exciting, you know? And that students are coming up onto the conveyor belt every year at your local childcare, at your local preschool, at your local high school. There's opportunities, and it's about partnerships. It's about partnerships because when we think about partnerships, then we're not doing it alone. We're not a group here having a conference on our own. We are passing that on. We're bringing in specialists, but we're disseminating their knowledge. We're sharing the leadership. We're bringing Indigenous leadership back in and running that story parallel together, moving forward. The names, the language, the song, the dance, we should be dancing. That's how culture was transferred across this country for thousands of years, through song and dance. Your passion dances inside you. It's clear, I can feel it. I realise I'm down to the last 2 minutes. I see what's going on. I see how native plants and plant ecology systems and land management are growing cultural stability through land and seed ranges caring for country, through land care groups, through bush care in the city. They all have deep connections to what you're doing. Victor Stephenson and the Fire Sticks Alliance, and I know that we've had talks about what's going on at that level, where cultural burning is being expressed as a tool for landscape understanding. Bruce Pascoe and his book Dark Emu has provided a cultural crowbar to crack the rigid colonial stonework and inform new views and appreciations of landscapes. Deadly young scientist Corey Tutt is telling stories to a captive young audience. As I said, Landcare's opening the door to succession. Someone like Millie Formby is connecting shorebirds with wetlands, and the importance of wetlands and wetland species to feed the shorebirds so that they can fly from one side of the world to the other every year, and she's flying around Australia at the moment. These are stories that we can share intergenerationally to celebrate the power of our native plants. Ralph showed me these two signs. It said one was 5 minutes and the other one was time's up. I found that intimidating. because it doesn't sort of, you can sort of tell when you see someone doing these ones, whereas Ralph's just there going, time's up, buddy. You know, it's just like, you've done it. Like, get off. He's going to pump the music up in a minute. It'll be like, and then I'll just drop through the floor. I'll finish off by saying I know that some of these themes have come up, but how and where is this taking place? The Atlas of Living Australia, BioBlitzes, iNaturalist, Nature Map, Frog ID, BirdLife Australia, the Backyard Bird Count, the National Pollinator Week, What's in My Backyard, to get young primary school students out and looking at the world through their nature goggles and then taking photos and tying in with what I talked about earlier. Our opportunity to collaborate, tell the stories, use the signage both of the heart and signage of the head, where information can be passed. I'm really, really stoked that we move out of this session into a discussion with some of our students that are here. And I want to finish off by saying big congratulations to everyone involved with the conference for taking that succession back and saying, let's start to do something and get our students and our youth into this room, because that's what.
Any questions for Costa? Oh, here we go. Please stand up. Thank you.
I am.
Just to ask Costa, what you do about anticrinuses that get into your cupboard, and I've had 2 sets, 13, and they make a 24 packet of toilet rolls into confetti. And then when you go into your, and some guest of yours opens the knife and fork drawer, and there they are in there as well. Now, that's very tricky. And so one by one, I had to take them, and if you put them in the garden, they just come back. They just and they got good knife and drawer. So I took them all into different areas. I live in Michigan Bowl area, and I took them in every direction so that they could all sort of get together with other ones. And would that be the right thing to do, or what?
Well, I think you missed a couple of opportunities. First of all, the educational opportunity of using antichinus to create shredded paper for your worm farm and composting. So there is an outlook and a perspective there. The second opportunity to illustrate to your visitors and your friends how lucky they were that the antichinus is there reflecting its antichinusness to them, and that they had a chance to meet an antichinus, which I haven't met firsthand in a cutlery drawer. I think there is opportunity in antichinus proofing our residents so that they can remain in their chosen. They chose you, and I think we need to reflect on that. And because they chose you, I think you can build a relationship. You need to talk more regularly with them. And they weren't happy about the fact that you took them away because they had built their community there. So I think there's room to combine many narratives into the antichinus story.
Other questions for Costa?
Can I just say that was not a class?
Yes, please. Over here.
I'm Tracy, and this is my first Native Plant Society conference. I'm actually with Landcare. I'm actually a volunteer and I'm a coordinator with Landcare, and I just want to say how much that resonates with me, what you just said, Costa, about working with our young people. And I would just like a little bit of advice. I've been lucky enough to spend some time with Jaden Gunn in his thing, and that's had to be a lot of one-on-one time as well, and I struggle with them expanding it to get to more people. And I'm pretty sure that just working one-on-one is a very, very good way to do it, but I just wondered what your thoughts on. We do stuff with lots of other young people, bigger groups, but I just find there's nothing better than that one-on-one time invested in them if you can do it.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to what I was talking about right at the beginning around finding truth, finding sources of knowledge, reputable, dependable, knowledgeable, and then being able to tap into those and share those wells so that you take away elements of that consistent search, like people are all searching. Once we find those reliable sources, our opportunity is to amplify them. And how we amplify them comes down to how creative we can be within the reach of our community to say, all right, I've reached my threshold here. Who can I talk to? Be that in the school, be that in the local community or the community garden, be that in the health service, be that in this group, like this, this is just fish in a bucket. Like, you wouldn't even, you'd just pick them out and say, I need you. And they'll be like, yay, I want to come. So, as I say to students, there is no such thing as a dumb question, and you can, the worst that can happen when you ask and reach out is that someone says, no, I can't do it. But not asking and then not knowing, that I believe is worse than asking and someone saying no, and then all you have to think, the way I bracket a no is, not at the moment. Or that's a stop sign because you've got to go around because you're going to come to the next. And if we don't take this on, and the most important thing that I say to students at this time is be mongrel, step up and reflect your passions, but on issues, the issue is there. You are not the issue. And anyone attacking you, you just direct them back to the issue. And then you do not take it. And you're under more fire than every single one of these people in here. They've never been attacked like you can get attacked or just ghosted. That's the equal and opposite by people being there but not connecting with you. You get rid of that and just say, that's the issue, it's not me, let's get back to the topic. Then you can be as passionate as you like, and then if that issue's time isn't right, you go, okay, let's move on to the next one. And that's the only way I move on. Otherwise, if I took on all that, if I took on every comment that people say, because when you stick your head out, when you reach out, you open yourself to yes or no. Your interpretation of that yes or no is your decision. And if we can develop that skill to not take no as negative, it's just, no, that's not right for me. You go, okay, that's fine. I'll come over here. The whole paddock of opportunity. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
All right. John, one last question, please.
John Aitken, I'm president of ANPSA Australia. Look, Costa, thank you very much for your enlightened talk to us today. I really enjoyed it. And I also enjoyed the fact that you are promoting Australian native plants on Gardening Australia. And I'm wondering how we, as a national organisation, could support you in your endeavours.
Wow, John, like we and our research team and all of us as not just presenters but the whole Gardening Australia team, we're just constantly looking for stories. Whether that story is a My Garden Path, and I mean I'm sure I could pick multiple My Garden Paths in here with just, and you know, your garden story, your connection story with nature. Like we're constantly filming those because we want that evocative side. We want that connection, that heart connection. It's like the science is in on so much of this that we want the heart to create the motivation to engage the action, so people become the verb and they do the doing. Right? So the most important thing that I see in a room like this is our opportunity to tap into the knowledge that you have of projects, of incredible gardens, of incredible people doing their specific thing. You know, right here you've got grevillea specialists, you've got incredible people doing amazing things with Banksias and taking plants from around the country. Like, we just want stories. So any time you see something that's just, it doesn't even have to be like so mind-blowing, but just showing that path, showing the way, of how people have got into this, and not just practical but also motivational, that can take this person's kind of light bulb moment and then we turn it into a fluorescent, not 7-Eleven, but really light up that story onto the bigger stage, which is an incredible privilege, to do what we do, to amplify your stories, to amplify the connections within your society, the connections within where that goes back out into the university, where that goes back out into the TAFE, where it goes into, be it community greening or out into community gardening or schools or any threads. They're all welcome. So thank you for that. And just hit us up, hit me up.
Let's not just clap John and his question and the answer, but let's thank Costa.
If you enjoyed this presentation, then please subscribe to our channel. Other presentations from the conference are available in this playlist, with new ones being added all the time.